on Sunday night, 5 p.m. Eastern, all time zones around the world. We come to you every Sunday night. Before I begin, please hit the like, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you can be notified when I live stream. And I live stream, I'm trying to create a habit of people coming in on Sunday and Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Of course, that's depending on your time zone around the world, give or take hours, depending on where you live. So tonight we're going to talk about more on the wonderful book, Violets on the Window. This is chapter 19, The Grave. Now let's talk about Patricia. She died when she was 19. She was born and raised in a Spiritist family. So she understood Spiritism. She understood what was going to be ready for her when she went to the spirit world, the real world, the world we all come from and we will all return after our short stay on Earth. Now, remember, the stay's not very long. And if you live to 100, there is no time in the spirit world. So it's all state driven, different states and different, you go through different periods. And so therefore, it's just, there's time on Earth. And that's why spirits have said it's kind of hard when during mediums meetings and people ask you for, what happened on, December 4th, 1956 or whatever. And they're trying to think, okay, dates, then you have to correspond it to what the Earth date was, correspond it to how kind of what they kind of described it as kind of a shadow and how long it took for things to go from one place to the other. And they said it's very hard. That's why you can't expect exact dates from the spirit world. And that's why mostly when you get prophecies, you get them dependent upon other conditions, like something will happen, lightning will strike a tree, for instance, so some sort of event. But they will tell you on a certain date at this time this will occur, because it's hard to transfer from a time when a dimension where time is part of that dimension, but you see past, present, and future, right? It's you can understand. You see the whole thing of if you see a person, you see they've been, where they are, and where they're going to a certain extent, depending on your level. So, just to let you know, that's why time is hard in the spirit world. But let's get into Patricia, who is in the colony San Sebastian. And chapter is called The Grave. So let's start. So this is what Patricia said. Curious and interested, I had really resolved to learn. I would ask my friends and counselors to clarify my every doubt as they came up. Of course, she's writing about her time in San Sebastian, which is a spirit colony above the city San Sebastian. It's in the state Minas Gerais in Brazil. He goes, I like the spiritual life more and more each day. I felt my incarnation period had really been a journey, and now I had returned to my true home. And that can't be true. And you hear that over and over again. Your true home, your real home, where reality actually is in the spirit world. We are here. We are here temporarily. Why? We're here to modify our character and our personality for the better. That's why we're here. We are on the campus called Earth to go through the necessary trials and tribulations to help us grow as people, to be better, to one day to become a perfect spirit. I'll continue. So it was with much happiness that I accepted an invitation from Arthur to attend a Spiritist session at the Spiritist center my family used to go to. We left the colony long before the session was scheduled to begin. We took the opportunity to visit my family, some uncles, and many friends. As we still had some spare time, and Arthur invited me, do you want to go to the cemetery and see where your body is buried? She says, well, it's so strange to think of my body is buried. I don't feel it. And he said, good for you. Our carnal body is the precious raiment. You respected yours, took good care of it, yet it was perishable. Well, you didn't forget that either. You live well without it. Most people feel its loss terribly. So let's let's think about what he just said. You took good care of it. So just as you go to school, remember when you went to school and you had books, this is probably many years ago, and you made book covers for your hardcover books, and you made sure you didn't write in the papers, and you took good care of it because someone else would need to use that book. One of your jobs as a student would be to take care of that piece of property. And it was only yours as a loan. The same thing is with our body. Our body is temporary, but it's not to be destroyed while we're on Earth. And what do I mean by that? It means that you need to keep your diet well. You don't abuse alcohol or drugs, right? You can have some alcohol, right? But then you can't be an alcoholic because you're going to break down your body. You have to be careful. And this is what it's called. If you die because you have abused your body, and it's called an unconscious suicide, meaning that you actually left your body earlier than you should have because you didn't take care of it. And that is very important to know. That is not a good thing. In fact, that's what happened to Andre Louise, the wonderful spirit who wrote the whole series of books, psychographed by Chico Xavier, starting with No Solar. And when he went into the umbrella, they kept calling him suicide. And when he finally made it to the Spirit City, No Solar, he said, well, I'm not a suicide. He goes, well, you were. You drank yourself to death, and you had you died of syphilis. So there was drinking, and syphilis helped cause his death earlier than it should have. So that's what he means by you took care of yours. So I try to take care of mine not as well as I should. I still eat, steak, right? And, and even the spirit world says that, yes, we can eat meat, but we should try to eat as little as possible, fish and chicken preferably, and, and try to eat natural foods because everything is so processed now. So, in your diet, you really don't need, as the spirit says, you don't need extra things. Your body's made to have the natural food that you should have. But of course, everybody does need protein, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, they say, with milk or cheese, since it's it is from an animal that that's one of the purposes on Earth to give that to us. So I carry on. So we went to the cemetery, which is such a contradictory place. Some did not like it at all, thinking it is a sad place. Others enjoy walking around. For them, it is a pleasant atmosphere. It is a place of suffering for many, and of hard work for so many spiritual rescuers. I examined everything as we strolled around. There was a group of idle spirits, ugly and dirty, sitting on a wall telling jokes, laughing boisterously. They did not see us, since it would only be possible if we wanted them to. We are more subtle, and they could see only those who vibrated attuned with them and with matter. We did not stop. From the entrance, I could hear moaning and desperate wailing coming from some of the graves. And then Arthur explained, many do not accept the death of the body, and they don't want to leave it. Then she said, I saw the rescuer, spirits who patiently try to help alleviate the suffering of imprudent brothers and sisters who love the perishable matter more than their souls. The rescuers also tried to counsel the troublemakers who are always at cemeteries and yet do not live there. These rowdy hooligans, spirits, come to cemeteries because they do not have anything better to do. Now, let's talk about what we just heard. There were spirits there telling jokes, and of course, they could not see Patricia and Arthur. And she said, well, they couldn't see us because we didn't want them to. Well, that's true. And also, they couldn't see them because they vibrated. They were of a higher ratio of energy to matter, and they couldn't see them unless they attuned themselves to the level of the spirits that could not see them, which was they had to try to make themselves more denser, but they didn't care about that at that point. The spirit rescuers who were there most probably did attune themselves to that more denser body, which is, of course, much less dense than we are physically, which we, of course, we cannot, most people cannot see spirits. Some people have that capability. So that's why those spirits could not see them. And then they also said people that were still, at their cemetery. And this was, there was a great passage, sad, in the book Memoirs of a Suicide, where Camilo Branco shot himself, and then he kind of woke up in the cemetery, and he just was completely in shock. And here he was, his body was here, and he still felt connected to his physical body. Of course, he's confused because your perispirit is what your body looks like. Of course, now when you die, your perispirit withdraws from your body, and yet your perispirit is shown as what your body, looks like. It's that image. So this is how we're made up. We're made up of the spirit, the perispirit, and the body. So when you are in a physical incarnation, your perispirit connects to every cell in your body. It commands every cell. Of course, then that connects to the perispirit, connects to the spirit, which you retain all your memories. So any memory you had as a incarnate, no matter how many previous lives, all that will be retained. Now, when you pass over, you may not remember your previous lives until you are ready to do so. That could be too shocking for many people because we have done many horrible things in our previous lives. So these people, if you look at this and you think, okay, there's their perispirit, which is their idealized form of their body, and they're in their perispirit, but yet their body's somewhere else now. So the perispirit has disconnected, right? It's that silver cord that is referenced even in the Bible, and it's referenced by many people with NDEs, near-death experiences too, where they look back and they go, well, I'm still connected to my body. And of course you are. If you when you go out at night and you sleep and you roam the spirit world, it's always connected. It has an infinite amount of, tension of, extension, I should say, in that cord. Now, when these people die, that perispirit, if you die early, like an unconscious suicide, or suicide, the perispirit had a timer that it's only supposed to disconnect from the body at a certain time. When you leave your body early, the perispirit still thinks it's connected to the body, and therefore it's going to be very strange for you, and you're not going to be able. And this is not in all cases, unless the spirit world helps you, right? But you won't really leave that lower zone because your perispirit isn't ready to ascend, because it still thinks it's connected to a physical body. And some people, God bless them, stay in the cemetery and they actually see the worms and the decomposition of their body. And you don't even have to be an unconscious suicide or suicide. If you are wedded to your material body, that will happen, right? That's why when you have to be ready is, when you die, don't care what happens to your body. Your body, your physical body is just a diving suit that is dispensable, right? It's made of matter. Matter is going to decompose. That's the way it should be. It's all recyclable, right? But your mind, your spirit, and your perispirit, those are immortal. So let me carry on with what Patricia was saying. So then he also said, we heard moaning and desperate wailing, right? And then he said, many don't accept the death of the body. So then she said, I saw rescuers spiritually try patiently to help alleviate the suffering of imprudent brothers and sisters who love the perishable matter than their souls. Okay, I said that already. So when I came closer where my body was buried, I saw two ladies I did not know. And this is what she heard. Patricia died so young. She was pretty and refined. She studied and worked. She was such a useful human being. She had a future, poor thing. They prayed for me then so sincerely. They don't know I have a beautiful present and future, I said. And then Arthur said, well, many people who don't understand the continuation of life feel pity for those who pass away. Passing over for good persons means peace and joy. For the evil and idle ones, it is the beginning of the harvest of what they sowed while incarnated. And then Patricia wrote that I was grateful to those ladies, and I also prayed for them. Thanking them, I encircled them in peaceful energy. Arthur enlightened me a bit more, and he said, often prayers don't reach those we want to help, but they positively benefit those who pray. We walked a few steps in silence. Suddenly Arthur stopped and pointed it out to me. It's here. I looked at it carefully, analyzing. It's a simple grave, very much like my family's taste. I did not feel a thing, really. Slowly, I read the wise words chosen by my father. Here lies the mortal remains of the physical body. Patricia used to live and manifest herself among us. We miss you. Now, let's talk about that for a second. So when people that's led a good life and they died, don't say, oh, I feel so sorry for them. No, actually, you should feel rejoiced. Kind of like an Irish funeral, right, where people drink and are happy. An Irish wake, I should say, which I've been at, but since my mother's side is Irish. And that is the way it should be done, because those people are in quite literally a better place. They're in their bodies. If they were old, they're now young. If they were ill, they're now in great health, right? All that, they are in a great place. Now, for the people who you're not too sure about, we should also pray for the good people to say, I miss you, but don't emphasize the miss. Emphasize that do well in the spirit world, be happy. And then for those who think may have a hard time, pray for them to notice the superior spirits, pray for them to look up to the light, and that will be very helpful. The other thing is there was a great passage by, it was one of the books by Psychographed in the series by Andre Luis. I think it was The Messengers. And Andre Luis was talking to a spiritist who had newly died. And in fact, Andre Luis was walking with the man called Demas, walking with the other people going to his funeral. And Andre Luis said, well, can I ask you some questions of how you feel since you just died? So here is the impressions of a person who had just passed over. Now, this person was a spiritist, so he expected to leave his body with no problem. So then Andre Luis said, well, Demas, how do you feel? He goes, well, I'm still a little bit confused, but I feel good. He goes, well, are you hungry? He goes, no. But, if I think about my physical existence, then I get hungry and thirsty. But if I change my mind and I look and think about the spirit world, then I'm no longer thirsty and hungry. And he goes, and he says, well, the effects of the illness is, again, if I put my mind away from my physical body, I feel great, right? But if I sometimes think of what I was before, then I feel those old feelings coming back to me. And that is really an important thing to remember. When you pass over, let it all pass, right? Forget your illnesses, forget your ties to your material body, and know that you now are this perfect body, because you are as you think you should look. You are this healthy body who is immortal. Nothing can ever bad happen to you unless you think it does, right? Because in the spirit world, thought is action. And so this is very interesting. The other thing is that, the spirit world, why these hooligans were there in that grave, is people who are newly dead, many spirits will try and take advantage of them. And in fact, that was also said in the book Memoirs of the Suicide by Camille Branco. The author of that is Yvonne Piera, a great book, I recommend it. Is they try and take advantage of people who were not spiritual, and therefore they don't really get help. And then, of course, a lot of these people, they have spirits who are rescuers, but then they can't see them, or they don't notice them, or they're just so in shock they ignore them. And of course, what we said before in Patricia's books, there's people that told her that, yeah, they said I was dead, but I didn't believe them, so I ran away from them. I thought they were crazy, because there's people are like they don't believe they're dead. In fact, I've heard that in mediums meeting, like, am I dead? And then they have to be convinced that they're actually dead. It's like that movie Sixth Sense, which was really good in the fact that, the main character, it was Bruce Willis, went around and he actually interacted. And then finally in the movie, they kept saying that, well, doors were locked and people didn't pay attention to them. And that's really what happens, is they'll go to places and they'll go, hi, to their mother, father, wife, brother, whatever. And they'll just ignore them. They go, why are they ignoring me? And then they finally discover, and other spirits around them say, well, unfortunately, you've passed away, and now it's time to go to your next phase, right? You are in the spirit world, your real home. So let me get back to the book. So then Patricia said, when she was at her grave, I looked at it and meditated for a few minutes. I had had prior knowledge that my spirit would survive the death of my body. But only now I understood why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. Many souls are spiritually dead beyond their physical death. I looked around and I saw spirits that, besides having lost their bodies, continued to be dead, blind, and dumb to the life in unity with God. So very interesting. So again, she spotted that. And that's when Jesus said, look, let the dead bury the dead. Let's concentrate. They will be taken care of. And like so many other passages in the New Testament, when Jesus said something, to us it sounds allegorical. Let the dead bury the dead. Well, no, it is absolute fact. The spirits were there. They're helping the dead get out of their bodies. They were taking them to places, those who deserve it, right? Those who didn't were there, but then they were met by other not so great spirits. The dead are burying the dead. And that's what's just is amazing when you start reading Spiritism, and then you read the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, which I don't know about many people, but when I read the Bible, there's many stories and allegories and parables that really didn't make sense to me. But what you read about Spiritism and you start learning about it, it begins to make sense. And in fact, this book, Allan Kardec's The Gospel According to Spiritism, talks about what he means by let the dead bury the dead, right? He talks about all these other passages in the Bible and the New Testament and what Jesus really meant by them. In fact, I have a whole series on my YouTube channel, a playlist, which is The Gospel According to Spiritism, which I go chapter by chapter in what each saying, really meant. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. What does that mean? All these different things, are explained and explained very eloquently. And when you read the Bible now with the knowledge of Spiritism, you really start understanding how brilliant Jesus was, and also how he had to kind of couch the true aspects of what the spirit world in a little nicer way, and that because people would not be ready for it. And Spiritism tells us that the spirits will only communicate to us given the level of technology and the level of culture. So here's a question. Because I'm getting into spirituality. I was raised a Christian. I believe there's more spirituality to Christianity than what Christians are aware of. And yes, that is very true. That is what I am trying to bring to. And there's not just more spirituality, but Spiritism, which is so interesting, and which I try to do in my books, is I try to give you what's behind the curtain, right? In The Wizard of Oz, what's behind the curtain. Because when we are raised as Christians or Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists, whatever we are, we're given this kind of fuzziness of what happens after death. Then Spiritism not only tells us spirituality and why we're on earth and how we need to improve ourselves, but they're giving us facts, processes, and procedures, and how the spirit world actually operates. They tell us there's many levels of heaven, right? As Jesus said, there are many houses in my mansion, right? And they say how a spirit rises. They talk about Jesus in the spirit world, how he is our governor of the planet, and how somewhat normal everything, the city of San Sebastian, where Patricia lives, is there's streets, there's water, there's plumbing, all these things. There's groups, there's libraries, there's schools and universities, and you go to them and you learn. These are like some of the more mundane secrets of life on the lower levels of heaven. When you go from life here on earth to lower levels of heaven, they don't shock you and giving you this wonderland. They just make you comfortable, and they're very subtle, and they make everything so you go from one step to another. Just like you teach kindergartners, right? You don't give them calculus when they're first in school. You don't even give them, addition, subtraction. You wait a year or two for that, right? You go them up, and this is why Patricia was in San Sebastian, because they tell people how to volatilate, which is moving by the power of your mind, right? Because why? Thought is action in the spirit world. So the spirit world has determined that now we are ready to be told more actionable things and to be told more things that we can understand. As for instance, we've been told in the books by Emmanuel that we have a unique ID and that all our thoughts radiate out with unique ID. And in the books by Reverend G. Vallone, we're taught that everything you have is captured and stored. Now, if Jesus said that when he preached on earth, they go, yeah, you have a unique ID on all your thoughts. They go, first of all, like, how can that work? And how can thoughts be stored? Well, now we can understand that. Now, we were told thoughts can be stored, and we have a unique ID back in the early 1900s, right? 20th century. But by around, 1970, 1980, more and more people understood about databases and computers. And now with cell phones, right? All your cell phones have a unique ID. And whenever your cell phone transmits to a cell phone tower and then goes to the base and then calls the number you're trying to call, and comes back and it finds you because it's got that in the data, right? All because you have a unique ID. And then, of course, everything in your cell phone conversation is recorded, correct? So it's no different. And this is why, for anybody who thinks they have privacy, no, nothing you do or think is hidden. And that's why, as Joseph said, there's more to spirituality in Christians than Christians are aware of. That's why not only do we have to act well, we also we're on earth to rewire this, right? We're rewiring our personality and our character, because when we pass over, that's all we have. We have our personality and character. That's what we're here to improve at. And so when you think about Spiritism and what it exposes, exactly what Buddhism says, and then Hinduism is as far as reincarnation. And it tells us what is the purpose of reincarnation. It is because we have to atone for our past wrongs. And that doesn't mean that when we do something bad in the past and we're punished, oh, okay, you did something bad in the past, you're going to be whipped or punished, right? No, that's not how the spirit world works. The spirit world is based on love. We go through the certain stimuli for us to understand that what we had done before, we would never want to do again. So if you had a bad breakup with a spouse or other, whatever, and they treated you like dirt, well, most probably that person was put there to treat you like that. Why? Because you treated someone else like that in the past. And so instead of being mad at that person who treated you like, you'd say, okay, that person was just an actor in the play to teach me what I should never do to anybody else. That is a lesson you should take. Don't take the lesson as, I want revenge on the next person, because then you're just going to put yourself lower and lower in the spiritual world. So let me carry on with what Patricia said. So she said, I understood why I let the dead bury the dead. Many souls are spiritually dead beyond their physical death. I looked around and I saw spirits that, besides having lost their bodies, continue to be dead, blind, and dumb to the life and unity with God. Therefore, they were dead to the eternal truth. Observing closer, I saw that there was no substantial difference between the incarnate who denied the existence of the spirit and the spirit who forgot his likeness to God. The emanations from one as well as the other are dull, ugly, and even smell bad, as it happens to incarnates who have had bad vibrations and do not tend to their personal hygiene. So let's talk about that for smell for a second. Some people say, and they've told me, I was at this gravesite and I smelled something really like flowers, but it was indescribable. And that's usually a good spirit that you can smell that and is around you. And sometimes it just could be the air and coming from other plants and flowers or someone with perfume next to you. But other times you can smell a spirit, and you really can. I've smelled that before. And I'm not a medium, but somehow I've done that a couple of times where I could smell something that was just, I've never smelled before, but it just smelled nice and wonderful. And it must have been a good spirit. Now, I've never smelled the rottenness, but you can also, other people said in NDEs and other mediums, they can smell bad smells when they see a very ignorant, immature spirit. So that does happen. If it's happened to you, I'm hoping to give you some validation to that. So then Arthur said, let's go, Patricia. He goes, yes. He said it was a relief to leave the cemetery. I did not like cemeteries while incarnated and still don't now while that I'm a discarnate, meaning she's in the spirit world. We headed for the Spiritist Center as planned. I was very pleased to see the structure made of mental energy standing alongside the material construction. It is an energy field that discarnates cannot penetrate. Consequently, many of them think they are prisoners in some Spiritist centers. If they stay, they have to wait for the appropriate time for orientation or assistance for whatever their troubles may be. Spiritist centers are simple places, and I knew this one particularly well. The mental energy construction that only spirits see is actually a rescue station area that tends to sick discarnates. Everything is clean and comfortable. There's a yard for the incarnates and a garden for us. The volunteers greeted me, smiling as if they knew me. So let's talk about that for a second. So put this in your vision. There is a Spiritist center, and it could just be a simple one-story or two-story office building, right? But yet the spirit world has expanded upon it. And let's say during a medium's meeting, which is why I tell people who are interested in mediumship, I said, look, first study, read, the Medium's book by Allan Kardec, try to go to the Spiritist Center, take classes in mediumship. In Brazil, they go through a year, maybe more, of learning how to be a medium. Why? And of course, and all people also ask me this, because the Catholic Church says you shouldn't talk to spirits because they're all demons. Well, yes, some of them are ignorant and immature, and that's why you should know the ones who are helping you and the ones that are trying to fool you or hinder you. That's why it's important to know. Spirits are just like us. There could be superior spirits who are coming from heaven, and there could be inferior ones who are dumber than we are, right? And meaner than we are. And some of them are smart enough to try and fool you. And that's why you have to be careful. And that's why around Spiritist centers, they create this mental force field where discarnates who just want to be there and bother people, they're not allowed in. It's a protective gate. And then they will bring to the mediums meeting. I've been in mediums meeting where it's not there to help the population, let's say, where you want to know what happened to Aunt Alice. It's the mediums meeting, no other people were there. I was there on the back wall. So I was, just an observer. But they were there to help discarnates because and then you say, well, why would discarnates want to talk to mediums? That's a good question. Well, because it's like a kid will listen to another kid, and and not an adult. And discarnates, they still associate themselves with physical human beings, and therefore just associating themselves with them and listening to what they're talking about will help them over some problems. And then some really bad shaped ones just need to kind of get themselves and kind of be one with that medium's body, so they kind of temporarily rearranges and helps repair their paraspirit because they were in such a dangerous mental loop and they'd done something to hurt the paraspirit. And so those things are necessary. So then when she says, well, there's this whole garden and all that. So again, it could be in this 2-story building and there's buildings next to it. But then in the spirit world, they construct, right? Because this is all thought. They construct this like maybe arena where more spirits can see what's happening in the medium's meeting. They construct other areas that they take, just like they say, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Well, as many as they want, because they can take that space and expand it and not impose upon the physical space that is already there. And that's what happens. And in fact, there is a story, I talk about that in my book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, where the city was on one level of heaven, and the people in that city were ready to move up to another level, right? Because there are different levels of heaven. And as you go up from one level to the next, become lighter, less dense, and more energy, and therefore you become more spiritually mature. And they invited all the people into this, little convention hall. And then they said, look, you have all done a great job. And we're going to rise into a higher level. And then at that level, you're going to be able to see your past family and friends who are also on that higher level. And they're waiting for you. And now this was like a small little township, right? And they had their houses built by mental energy, but higher spirits built them for them. And then they said, you don't have to go anywhere. And then the higher spirits came and they said, they made the walls transparent. And instead of seeing their old vision of what their town looked like, they saw that everything changed. There was parks. It was bigger. They built a almost like a huge complex for the leader of that colony, and they expanded the forest, everything, and they walked out and they were all excited, and they did that just by repurposing the state of where they were. So this is why it kind of gets hard, because our minds want to think of geometrical shapes and sizes, up and down, north, south, east, and west, squares, triangles. And so I'll describe these things in physical description, but we also have to remember that these are all logical constructs, which if you think about a database and you think, okay, think about a game. Think about a house in the game, or think about someone traveling, an avatar, right? And they go from one town to the next town. And in that game, it shows them walking along deserts or forests, and then maybe swimming across a river and then walking to the new town. Well, that avatar really never did anything. It was all logical. And what was done is the data behind that person, the state of that person was, okay, moving from desert to forest to river to town. This is what happens in the spirit world, is higher spirits manipulate the universal fluid that makes up the spirit world to change the state. They changed the state of that city. They rose it to a level because their vibrational state was in tune to a higher level, and they made it appear. And they also built new edifices. And in fact, the building they made for the leader of the city, they first built a model, right? So higher spirits come together and they create a model. They may not create a physical model. Here they created a physical model so they could all determine how they wanted to work together with their minds So then their willpower could create this edifice through their own force of will. That's why we're here now, because we need to learn to be disciplined with our minds. That's why we go through hell on earth sometimes, trials and tribulations. We have to be calm and cool and loving in every circumstance. And boy, is that hard. I'm not there yet either. And so they built this. And then they kept the model. They kept it like in the park in front of the building. And someone could go to the model and they could think. And they would say, okay, I want to see so-and-so. And the model would tell them what office, floor, room that person was in, if the person was in, if there was a meeting, when that meeting would occur, and what room that was in. So imagine that being in our state on the earth now. Is you had a model, and of course all the data that would flow. It had to have sensors in the rooms to know who was where, people entering data to know what meeting was held when, and if you could join or not. This is the complexity of the spirit world. This is how this can happen. It's just fascinating. This is why Spiritism, studying Spiritism, is so exciting. So I ended with the volunteers greeting me, smiling as if they knew me. And then Arthur explained, well, they really do know you. You used to come often to the Spiritist Center when you lived here. This is a place where you prayed so often for our unfortunate brothers and sisters. Then Patricia wrote, I answered their greeting timidly and thanked them for the attention. Patricia, Arthur said, I have some work to do. You stay here with Chow and Lorenzo. When the session is about to begin, I'll send for you. And the here that Arthur referred to was the front of the building. For incarnates, there was a gate, a narrow corridor, and a door. For discarnates, there was a narrow corridor, and after the gate, there was a small room which served as a reception area. It was the place where discarnates would go to obtain help and orientation. The same way incarnates go to these places seeking help, so do many spirits. I stayed there, quietly observing everything with much curiosity. Soon the discarnates in need of assistance began to arrive. Many were accompanying the incarnates. Tial Lorenzo's job was to record the request. Then the counselors would study each one and try to help in whatever way possible. A lady came asking for help for her son, also a discarnate, who was wandering in the lower zones. A gentleman came to ask for help for his incarnated daughter, who was having marital problems due to the influence of a disturbed discarnate. So this is quite normal. This is, life on the lower zone, even for discarnates, meaning people in the spirit world, is still full of drama and, because they're not spiritually aware. They're still tied to materiality. They still want revenge. They still have hate and jealousy. I mean, I've told the story before where I was in a medium's meeting and this lady went into a medium, right? And she said, Zika, Zika, Zika. And they go, and the counselor medium said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I wanted my neighbor. I hated her to die of Zika, but then I died of Zika. And of course, here she was, a discarnate, still wanting her neighbor to die. But doesn't she know she's in the spirit world and she should look to God and know how great, how lucky she was? No, she wasn't ready for that. This is why it helps to pray for people who have died and help them ask for help for them and for them to open their eyes. So an old gentleman approached. He had difficult walking and lamented, I came here to ask help from Mr. Joe. I've been sick for a long time and I'm getting worse. In recent times, everyone seems to ignore me. They don't pay any attention to me nor give me any medicine. Nobody talks to me. I didn't do anything to them. I know Mr. Joe. He helps many people. I came here to ask him to help me. May I talk to him, please? He spoke sluglessly, looking sidewise. Suddenly, he stared at me. Good gracious, it's Mr. Joe's dead daughter. It's a ghost. Help. So here's an old guy that also died, didn't know he died. And then he saw his Mr. Joe's, it must be Patricia, dead's daughter. And then Patricia said, I ran away and hid behind Tion, not knowing what else to do. Lorenzo approached them and calmed them down with magnetic passes, while the other workers came by and took him into the center. And Lorenzo said, soon he'll receive orientation via incorporation. And then Patricia says, do I look like a ghost? And he goes, the poor man was scared out of his wits. I didn't want to scare him. I don't want to scare anybody. And then he said, well, you don't haunt anyone, but rather fill with light and joy every place you visit, said Lorenzo kindly. The discarnates who don't recognize their condition fear other discarnates. Many are afraid even of their dear departed relatives. So again, here's this old guy walking hard, could barely speak because he probably had a stroke at some time. And yet he was dead. And yet he had no connection to his physical body. He shouldn't feel any of that. But you are what you think you are. So he thought he was infirm. He thought he was old. He thought he was impaired. And therefore he acted that way. He didn't know he was dead. This happens over and over again. But he was walking around and he said, well, people don't talk to me. No one will give me medicine. That's because they didn't see him. They didn't hear him. So he needs to be told. And I've heard that before where people think, well, why isn't anybody listening to me? Well, because you're dead. And congratulations, you're back to the spirit world. So when you pass over, if you go up to people and you're not, like you died in your sleep, most probably, hopefully, anybody will have help from the spirit world to be taken to a place to kind of rest and recuperate. But if for some reason not, and you go to people and they just ignore you, you think to yourself, I could be dead. And then sit there and pray. Don't let the other more immature spirits bother you or influence or make you feel sad. Pray, get on your knees and pray and say, please, spirits, come and help me. Because they probably tried to help you and you just were focused on, you couldn't see them, right? Because you're focused on something else. Again, that happens many times. Where I know a story, one guy was dead and he was walking around and he said, well, why can't I find my friends and relatives? And a spirit came to him and said, well, they've been with you. You just haven't heard them. You can't see them because you're not ready to see them. And that could be what happened. So then Patricia said, I stayed with him trying to do whatever I could to help. I was recording requests rather distractedly when I heard, hey, and I looked up and saw a young smiling at me. He says, hi. He said, hi, can you see me? Yes. Cool. I was afraid I was becoming invisible. I stopped writing and looked at him. He was young, well-dressed, but dirty. He continued smiling. Look at me. It's been a while since I talked to a babe like you. Do you know you're very pretty? When do you quit working? Can I wait and take you home? Or maybe go for a walk for a while? He goes, I was surprised. And again, I didn't know what to do. Lorenzo came to the rescue. Hello, young man. Do you want to come in and find out why everyone thinks you're invisible? Don't be afraid. Come, we need to talk. The young man was scared, but Lorenzo's face inspired trust, so he went in. But before he did, he turned to me and said, wait for me at the end of the session. I want to talk to you, gorgeous. So he's trying to pick up poor Patricia. Lorenzo returned quickly. Lorenzo, this man doesn't know he's passed over. He'll also receive orientation. And then Patricia said, gee, what a night. First I'm a ghost, and then someone comes on to me. I could not help but let out a good laugh. So that just shows you how interesting life is after death for those who know. And for those who don't know, there's like this guy tried to pick up on another discarnate. And she, of course, he had no idea he was dead. And, he probably kept trying to talk to people and everyone ignored him. Of course, being young, you're probably used to that, right? But so this is what is so interesting about the spirit world. There's so many aspects of it that it's just ready for us to grasp and to learn and to be part of it. It's just amazing. So if you want to know more about the spirit world and how it works, I should really suggest for you to read my book. Now, it's actually on Kindle, paperback, and Audible if you want to listen to it. Heaven and Below, and it's a book one of Spiritism. And I talk about heaven, the lower zones, the dark abyss, which is like a hell, a type of purgatory. There is no hell forever. And I talk about Jesus and the spirit in heaven and how he is the governor of our planet. He's more than the wonderful carpenter who came and brought us so many revelations. And so that I try to expose that. I bring information in that was originally given to Jiva, but I bring other Allan Kardec's books, Yvonne Pierre's, Chico Xavier's, Devaldo Frankel's, And I try to put in one place a lot of information about what heaven is by going through the different messages from spirits of the Reverend G. One, but then I add to them and I explain more what those messages mean by bringing in other authorities and other spiritist messages from spirits to spiritist mediums. And then what I do is I try to go into my next book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, and show you what are we? Because if we understand what we are on Earth, why we're on Earth, and what we are when we leave the Earth, that gives us the knowledge, right, to motivate ourselves, right? Because I can't motivate you. I can't say, "Oh, come on, let's go," right? No, you have to decide for yourself through your own knowledge and your own free will, because your free will is totally respected. You have to decide for yourself why you're on Earth and what's important to you while you're on Earth. And that's all I try to do, is give you that information, and then you can decide. Now, you may say, this guy's crazy. There's no spirit world. And that's fine. You're not going to be damned forever if you don't believe in God or Jesus or any of this stuff. The spirits tell us, if there's a person who's an atheist and they're a really good person and they're honorable and they're loving and charitable and fraternal, they'll still go to heaven. Now, the danger with atheists is if they are a atheist who believe they're just completely asleep and dead after they die, they may be in that state for quite a while until they try with magnetic passes for them to wake up. So I just ask anyone who really doesn't believe anything, keep a little thought open that there could be life after death, so you can see. But it's so, you can ignore everything I say, and you've got more lives, right? You've got as many lives as you need to improve. And it's all based upon your own judgment and your own willingness to work. But let me say this. The spirit world has told us that the reward is 100-fold more than whatever you sacrifice on Earth to help to your own spiritual enlightenment. And I believe that with my whole soul. And if you even read, the examples of near-death experiences, NDEs, where people say, I didn't want to come back. I felt great in the spirit world. I felt this love and companionship. But they said, "Well, no, you gotta go back. It's not your time yet." But they wanted to stay, and that work. I mean, if you could work for a job, right, for a day, and then from really working hard, but then you get to spend 1,000 years of intellectual and spiritual bliss and happiness with people who love you and you love them. Isn't it worth it? And that's how we should look. This is our life on Earth is so short. Even if you live to 80 or 100, it's nothing compared to your immortal lifespan, right? What's 80 divided into infinity? It's practically nothing. I don't know what it is scientifically. I never even thought about that, but it's practically nothing. It's a blip in time. It's a blink of an eye. And that's why, don't worry too much what happens. And especially now, don't worry about politics or any of that stuff. All this is temporary. Spirit world said, like, whatever you really love on Earth, it's all going to disappear. The Earth itself will decay, right? The sun will expand and destroy the Earth billions of years from now. What are you worried about? If you love your house, well, that's going to decay. You're going to outlive that. If you love being a part of a culture or a race or country, well, I got news for you. It's all going to change in the future. It's all unimportant. Just look at yourself. Look at the trials and tribulations. Try and be as good and honest, thoughtful, and caring as you possibly can be. And study some. If you can study just a little bit, and that's why I try to bring in Kindle and audiobooks, YouTube videos, and the Spirit's book. Everyone should read the Spirit book. But if you don't like to read the books, I have a playlist of the Spirit's book, which I think I'll complete next week of posting the whole Spirit's book on audio, which I will read to you. And I also have it on my blog, NW Spiritism, where you can download it in audiobook format. I have it in 2 sections because it's so huge. But you can download it and put it in your, your book player, and it will save where you are. It will work. I also have an MP3 format too, if you want an MP3 format. So I try to bring this to you so that you can gather the information you want in the manner that you like. And believe me, the more you understand about why you're here in the spirit world, the less stress you're going to have. Because having wealth and having that yacht or that new car, it's not important. It's nothing in the scheme of things. It's nothing. It's not as important as you learning from the trials and tribulations and learning to live with your conscience and learning to filter everything through this conscience. And one of the biggest steps is to not rationalize away why you want something and you can ignore your conscience. If you can really start following your conscience, even though you're not materially rewarded, right? You may lose a job opportunity because you could have worked for this kind of iffy company who took advantage of people, but you didn't want to do that. That's okay. You will be better off. Now, I've been in that position before. I've worked with iffy companies that had some pretty strange things that they did with investors. Now, I didn't quit right away. I couldn't, all right? I had to feed my family. So, but I planned and I looked and I got out when I could. And that's all you can do. No one expects you to act like a saint. So anyway, I just want to put there, if there's any more questions, but let me know. And again, remember, hit the subscribe, hit the like button, please, hit the bell. And then I will be live every Sunday and Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, United States time. And I know I have lots of people around the world listening to me or listening to these after the fact. And of course, go to my blog site, nwspiritism.com. I have a lot of articles on there. I have the book, the Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. I have that on PDF. And so you can download it. Besides my audiobook of the Spirits book for free, I have Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation on PDF. You can download that for free, and that will give you a good introduction to Spiritism. Anyway, I want to say, everyone, God bless you and good night. God bless.